Hi, welcome to our podcast today. I'm Mary Abazia, and with me is Tom Spitali and Sean Wellham. And we always are kind of keeping our eye out on things. And one thing that is interesting is Nike. I mean, we've watched them for years, and they're incredible, and then they're not so incredible, and we're just wondering where they're going and what they're trying to do because they have to do something from a strategic standpoint. So, Tom, do you want to start us off on this?
Yeah, I guess it's a prototypical example of a mature product that is in need of some revitalization. Um, and as we always do, I guess we look at these things through the eyes of our tools and try to anticipate, what could have went wrong or what they could have done a little bit better. One of the things that's really interesting, just starting at the very, front end of our toolkit is when you look at influencers and stakeholders, they made a big bet in that they sort of doubled down on direct to consumer marketing. And apparently this created a bit of channel conflict with their wholesalers, with those that sell Nike brands in their stores. And this has been something that has really hurt them apparently, and they find themselves now in need of trying to recreate and reestablish some of those relationships if they want to kind of reverse the trend of declining sales. That's the first thing that I noticed. So you guys want to talk more about that, or have you noticed some other things that have been going on with Nike recently?
I think it's an interesting point, Tom, about distribution because it was always a cornerstone of marketing historically, right? One of the four P's was place, and that's really getting the product visible on the shelves in general speak. And I suppose as we've evolved to a much more direct to consumer model generally with online shopping and the fairly low barrier that anyone can present their product to the general public and set up a sort of retail environment, it's a really difficult strategic call to make because if Nike were to say no, we're only available in stores, they would probably be worse off than they are now because they would have lost. I'm guessing that the direct to consumer stuff has easily compensated for the lack of wholesale or retail support. They maybe I don't have details, so I'm just building generally on what you're saying. And I think the issue for the retailers is probably bigger because if Nike are going direct and so are Reebok and so are Asics and everybody else, the overall demand at the store level is possibly going to drop. Although I guess shoes the sort of thing you might want to try on or see, have that 3D experience with them. But it seems like a conundrum. But the way the world's moving, I don't see how they have a choice other than to do a very strong direct to consumer offer along with everyone else that has a brand. I think you have to make that option available, otherwise people are going to go elsewhere.
I think that I mean my daughter is smack dab one of their target customers. I mean, she would spend all her money on Nike shoes. And now she's like, oh, that store doesn't carry it, and that store doesn't carry it. So they really did limit, that audience from being able to go in and look at it and go, they went really expensive and not for any real reason. I mean, their whole thing was cool and having really interesting designs that, you'd look at someone's shoes and go, wow, you've got the latest. And that doesn't seem to be happening as much. They kind of, I don't know, it's like they fell asleep or something. They just, we published we had a pod a post about newer shoes coming on, and it was interesting that some of the Nike people actually downloaded it to check out what trends are happening with upcoming shoes, or at least better established cool new shoes like On now. So I think it's very interesting that they're asleep, but they have some ideas. So go ahead, Tom.
Well, what's really interesting is this harkens back to an issue that in the late 90s was huge just at the advent of the internet, where so many companies were kind of faced with the channel conflict of having the opportunity and the ability to sell direct versus sell through even their own stores. Like, what were they going to do with their own stores? Or if they even had independent, branded stores that were independently owned, what were they going to do with that? And the real forward thinkers figured out a way to kind of engage their channel in the direct to consumer kind of thing. They would drive people into stores if that's what people wanted to do. Some of the real innovative ones even cut the channel in on the direct to consumer sales. If they didn't do anything, they got a little piece if something was sold in the geographic vicinity of where they were. So it's really funny that this issue has come back to really hurt Nike. It seems like, what you need to do in that kind of situation is really consider how you can have the best of both, right? As Sean said, you got to have a direct presence, a direct to consumer presence to keep up. But how can you keep your channel engaged in such a way that they don't get mad and start kind of like cutting back the amount of space you get in their stores, but they feel like, somehow this is benefiting everybody by going direct to the consumer.
I think
Yeah.
the other thing that affects Nike is that it's essentially a fashion brand, isn't it? I mean, the whole thing is more. It's not about actual performance of the shoe, which is important, but it's more about the positioning they chose as this sort of way back in the day, this alternative, this new way of presenting an athletic shoe. And if you look at how they're like all fashion brands, you've got this element of fickleness amongst the consumers. So as soon as that bubble bursts, as soon as you become not cool, or you become your father's Oldsmobile sort of thing, you lose that market, and a natural evolutionary cycle is for someone else to go in and say, how can we be the new radical cool, the new kids on the block, the people that are going to shake up this market? And Nike were always going to be vulnerable to that because of you can only stay cool for so long, right? You only stay young for so long, and that's the reality. So maybe part of it, there's an inevitability about the challenge that Nike's facing. Maybe it could have gone no other way, regardless of what they did.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
a very
they actually got a
terminating
new
view of the world.
CEO. Yeah, they just got Elliot Hill. He's in charge now. So, when all else fails, fire at the top and see if this guy can bring new life into the company. There was a rumor that as he came in, he was going to clean house, but also they were going to look at doing outer wear, which they haven't been in before. And I think about from a strategic standpoint, is that a good idea? That space is so crowded already, and maybe they just have no other choice but to go into a new market for them. Hopefully, leveraging the relationships they have with these people that are also buying REI stuff. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. And I guess that's the other thing. You've got with the outerwear, you've got these other challenger brands that have come up in recent years, Under Armour and people like those that get a lot of traction, and part of their positioning. And Tom, you talked a lot about the I forget how you present it, the uncola, the alternative, the not the same, as almost redefining a category. Maybe not quite as strong as that, but there is an element of saying we're not Nike or we're not Reebok, we're not those sweats that you see everybody wearing. These are new, and guess what? Andy Murray's wearing them on court this season, or what have you. And that sort of guerrilla type marketing, it was really what Nike started. They're bitten by their own dog to a certain extent. They figured out how to do this, but other brands like Under Armour, who do more outerwear than shoes, I think, are taking that space. It just becomes ever more competitive. And you almost wonder at what point do they have to start thinking about it in terms of a legacy brand. I mean, the Jordan is still their best-selling shoe. I mean, there were three people born in that year. There was Tom Spitali, Sean Wellham, and Michael Jordan. I mean,
What a great year that was.
what a great
That's
year.
funny. That's
60,
very funny, Sean.
you're relying on people of that age to present your athletic shoes. I mean, yeah, it seems like they unless they're waiting for it to become the Chuck Taylor of Converse, they still trade
They're
off Chuck
back.
Taylor.
They're back. See, they come. Kamala Harris has revitalized Chucks and Pearls. I think is the combination,
Yeah,
and so that's helped them. I think that the whole concept of positioning and branding and sub-branding and knowing, what space that you own in the mind of your target markets is so important here because I think Nike has gotten long in the tooth. And so I think by understanding and facing the cold reality of of what you stand for now and trying to figure out again through sub branding or even just new brands that are under the Nike moniker. Maybe you become a house of brands where you develop and promote some brands that are completely named differently, but they're under the umbrella. I don't know. There's like a lot of positioning strategies that are available here, but it all starts with being able to understand where you stand today. And it might not be fun for Nike to find that out. Um,
That's a real strategic decision, isn't it? To say, do we create a challenger brand ourselves, right? So rather than looking at all the ones that are out there, do we have a different brand? That's goes so against the whole Nike philosophy, who spent their time broadening into different sports, into soccer, into golf, into all, well, pretty much every sport that gets a television audience, they are there. So to change, and no one, this is our discussion, no one's suggesting that they're bringing that up, but that's the sort of real strategic grit you have to get into when you're in a situation.
you have to turn a lot of rocks over. You've got to look at your
Yeah.
influencer map. You got to look, are there new influencers or have we made a mistake and we need to go back and double down with wholesalers? You got to look at, is there innovative ways that we can segment and position, target and position? Do we extend beyond the product like this new guy's talking about without outerwear? I mean, I think there's this discipline of doing all these things and doing it before you have to, you know. But it does always come back to, I think, facing the reality of the current situation. And we do, I think, when companies have success, they're loath to look in the mirror, and say, hey, have we gotten a little long in the tooth? But you've got to do it.
It's another.
I want to say something. The gas gauge that we use a lot of times at the beginning to say, are you inside out or outside in? When we do that, there was a time where Nike around the world was coming up as being market driven and market driving. And over the last couple of years, that barometer, we have not seen that at all. And my guess is that they're heading towards a BlackBerry status if they keep resting on their laurels and don't do some of the things that we're talking about here. Because I mean, great companies, great companies, Nokia, Polaroid, they all end up in that graveyard. And it's interesting to watch Nike heading towards the graveyard right now.
But Mary, we do see companies come back. You know what I mean? It's like we have this like front row seat when we ask people at the beginning of all of our sessions around the world every week or every other week, like what brands do you love and why? We it's a standard part of what we do at the beginning to get people thinking about what are really successful brands doing so very well strategically. And we've seen companies that have been on the list for a number of years disappear and come back. So, maybe Nike's headed for the graveyard, or maybe they can take a step back and look at a way through, again, like we said, turning over a whole bunch of rocks and trying to a couple of different experiments around the world that might allow them to regain their past glory.
One of the challenges, though, when you bring somebody new in at the top, there's a real self-fulfilling prophecy or hostage to fortune situation, because you can't bring someone in and they get interviewed by the press. Say, you're taking over Nike. What are the plans? You can't say, I don't know, haven't really looked at it yet. I'm going to have a little look and come up with an idea or two. That's not going to do the shares price any good. You can't just turn up. You have to say something. Oh, we're going to look at outerwear. We're going to start float these ideas. And you suddenly become a hostage to your initial idea, which is no way going to be the best idea unless you're very lucky. Replacing someone at the top and then making huge demands of them so they telegraph their intent may not mean a lot to a lot of people listening, but just have a look at the tale of Manchester United and their ongoing for a head coach. and how everyone is like always so on these monstrous contracts. So 5-year contract, 20 million. What are you going to do? And it's like, oh, I'm going to do this, that, and the other, and it's not worked. I honestly, and I know there's no. I'm just sort of thinking out loud. There's no alternative, but it would be so much better to say you're taking over. What are your plans? Haven't got a clue. But what I am going to do is have a pretty good look, and then I'll get back to you.
So you know, at the risk of sounding commercial, but I've got to say it. I mean, what we've done some previous recent podcasts on is how artificial intelligence AI can really speed up the strategic planning process, cutting it by as much as in half. And one of the things that we're finding is the ability to look at a lot of different strategies very, very quickly is something that artificial intelligence can bring in. So if you're out there and you're sitting like in a similar position, give us a call. I mean, within, you know, a few short weeks, you can have a little bit of a better idea what you're going to do. You can look at a whole bunch of a range of options, and you don't have to be, you know, as Sean said, hostage to the first thing that comes to mind just because everybody's asking you. Maybe take a week or two, look at a full range, let us help you turn over a whole bunch of rocks, and then figure out what you're going to do from a litany of ideas for mature products. That's just about as commercial as I want to be on this podcast, but it is something that's happening that AI is giving us the ability to do, is move very quickly strategically.
Seen a huge improvement in how people you do exactly what you're saying, Tom, because the same thing that if you try and start with a blank sheet of paper, it's hard. If you edit work that someone else has done, when we've written articles and bounced them back and forth, the toughest job is filling that page. The easier job is to edit that page and send it back and say, I've added this, I've taken that out. And that's how we work together. A little insight for you, everyone listening, but that's how it works. But the tough job is the blank sheet of paper job. What we do with AI, what you've developed a lot with AI, Tom, is the ability to give people that not necessarily the right information, but a bunch of options that allow you to make a more methodical approach to the strategy and to compare and contrast and to evaluate and to move forward without the burden of having to come up with that big idea or without the challenge of a blank sheet of paper. It gives you a head start in the race towards finding that strategy that's going to work for you.
It's a cool time.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, thank you for joining us. As always, we really appreciate when you send us notes. We like your insights, so keep them coming. Thank you.